So where did I just leave off there? So the ambassadors could be a group that other groups could bring outputs to. And then the ambassadors can also participate in groups that are related to their disciplines. But they're also a really good melting pot interdisciplinary exchange program. They're a place where we have been having informal meetings, again, kind of trying to work towards a charter at some point in the future, where we come and just talk about issues that are related to outreach, generally within our disciplines. I think that probably sums it up pretty well. I don't want to take too much more time talking about them as a group that doesn't quite exist yet, but that idea I think could be useful to your group.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Beth. That does sound like an idea that would be useful. And thank you very much for being so articulate in a surprising way. Not that it's surprising that you're articulate, but you are surprised by needing to be articulate. So I think this.
Can I ask a question?
One moment. This idea of the ambassadors group is really interesting. It gives us a place to think about where we might work with the ambassadors group to feed some of this information out. Françoise, please, your question.
Yes, I think that dissemination of information is a good idea because we could build a package of relevant outputs and provide them to the ambassadors. But I think it could be also good that we discuss with them about evaluation of research, because I'm not sure everybody is ready to think about it as an issue. Probably for many people, it's an issue for themselves. So it's okay. They know it's an issue, but maybe not everybody. So maybe we could organize a meeting, which could be open eventually. It could be a cross-group meeting or an interest group meeting in which we invite the ambassadors who are willing to talk with us. So it could be an action we can decide. I think if Beth thinks it's okay. The other aspect is, do you think there are people among the ambassadors who would be interested in thinking about the research outputs in their domain, or who could find interested people to do that? So this is also a question to Beth, but we can ask the question to the ambassadors when we are in the same room, in the same Zoom meeting.
I think that's a great idea, Françoise, and I invite someone who is taking notes to please write that idea down in the notes document under potential actions. And Beth, we will look forward to following up with you and the group of friends who talk sometime, who may eventually be a group. 110 support that future outcome. And then I think in here we had a question from Stephanie. Please, Stephanie.
Amy, question for Beth, actually. So my understanding is the ambassadors are sort of ambassadors for different disciplines or areas or whatever. What's the global coverage, though? So because I know it used to be an RDA Europe program. Is this now a global thing? So do you have ambassadors in all kinds of countries, or is this still mainly Europe?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would say for the moment, it's still mainly Europe, because we had already built a network of people who were based in Europe because of the funding that was coming through the European Open Science Cloud. The intention was to make it more global. And we had some interest from people who thought, okay, what is this ambassador group? Can I identify as an ambassador as well? What's going to be the commitment? But I think until we formalize a group, it's going to be quite difficult to make clear what that commitment is. At the moment, we do have some participants, I think at least one from South America, who's joining our informal meetings, but we're definitely not global yet.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to reach out and build a global community, but that's probably the second or the third step before the first.
That happens after they become a group. Yes? First group, then network. Yes, you do need global coverage. And then I'd like to turn to Fabien Bourget online.
So, sorry, there is a question in the chat for Beth again. How do we join the group of friends? From Daniel Manrique. So, Beth, I think you can answer in the chat.
I love that that is, like, off the top of my head now, the thing that everybody's going to call this group, the group of friends. I'll pop a link to our listserv. I started a listserv so that we could communicate with each other because we didn't have a platform on the RDA platform. So I'll drop that into the chat, and you can follow that for meeting invites.
Right. Thank you.
We'll join too. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Fabian, I'd like to turn to you for your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. So I have just a question about the role of these ambassadors through EOSC, because I'm thinking about specific projects managed for EOSC, especially one of them, which is in close connection with the data, which is called Skills for EOSC. I think maybe it could be very interesting that these ambassadors have interaction with the dissemination working group of this sort of project. So it could be another role that we can imagine about that. I don't know what you think about that.
I think there's lots of different ideas about what the ambassadors could possibly do, and that's certainly a good suggestion. The problem is that there's a lot of things that they could do, and where's the money for them to do it? They had previously been funded, and I'm not saying that the funding was overly generous, but it did give them, you know, the excuse to their institutions in order to spend some time during the day, during their working day, working on these sorts of things. The more things we ask people to do as volunteers off the sides of their desk, the more difficult it becomes to manage all of the potential things that they could be doing. So I think this is something that you can bring to the group and ask if anyone would be interested in, but I don't know about formalizing that as a group goal.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for that, Beth, and thank you for the question, Fabian. I would encourage anyone else who would like to connect with the group of friends and Beth. Definitely, I think Beth has dropped the link to the listserv so that you can connect with them there, whether it's joining the group of friends or finding things for the group of friends to do with money attached. I believe we heard that message loud and clear from Beth. So please bring funding is what we hear. And then I'd like to return to, could you go back one slide, please? 2 slides? There we go. Yes. So one of our other possible activities was to reinforce the liaison, the connections that we have with COARA. So I believe, Fabien, you were going to speak a little bit about that.
Yes, of course.
Please do.
Yes, I see two different ways to interact with COARA. With the central of COARA, with the secretariat actually, and I think there's already some connection with the secretariat. It's important to continue. Actually, there will be a change in the board, in the steering board, very soon, and so it can be a new way of thinking of how implement the RDA outputs directly in the working groups of COARA. Because I think for me, there's a big lack on the data actually on the working groups. They are very general and they will become more specific, I think, at one stage, and it should be quite interesting to have something very specific on the data. And the other way, and it's more why I can speak about it, it's through the national chapters, the different national chapters. Actually, I'm the coordinator of the French national chapter, and I'm very interested with this work on the data and how to take into account in the fair assessment. And so it could be another way to interact directly with the national chapters. And of course, as the coordinator of the French chapter, I can discuss with the other coordinators in order to try to implement something or to try to think collectively about these problematics and to take into account the different outputs. And of course, it should be quite interesting to have interaction in our national chapters, but also in different working groups of COARA, from people from the RDA who are thinking about these issues and how to work with that, and to try to share all the experiments, because COARA is already founded with the good practice sharing actually. So that's one of the propositions that I can do, and one of the things that I would like to continue with the French national chapter actually.
If I can,
Lovely.
I
Yes,
may
please,
have,
Françoise.
yes, my suggestion here would be eventually that one of the co-chairs of this interest group, the RDA group, can come to talk about RDA and the interest group in one relevant meeting, either of the national chapters or COARA, but this you will know. So you just tell us if it's possible, but it's a possible action that could help to bring the liaison more efficiently, maybe. So it's just to tell you to keep this in mind, and I will tell that also to the person who is organizing the COARA when I meet her in the coming weeks. So it's just a suggestion of action for us and for you, if it's possible, since we are looking for actions on our side.
Thank you for that, Francoise. Fabian, does it sound like that's a possibility?
Definitely.
Excellent. Please, someone write down that down in the action section of the meeting. Getting actions out there. So we've heard about a little bit of discussion about two of these possible activities to discuss. I'd like to open the floor, both literal and metaphorical, to further discussion, further thoughts about where might we collectively consider taking action in these areas in terms of connecting the efforts that we have, understanding what the efforts are that exist currently, thinking about how we take these small steps together to push us into those places where we really want to see evaluation of research happen. I know for me personally, I think the NIH's call for let's make an S index like the H index. Interesting, also cautionary. So thinking about, so that's going to happen. People are going to come up with ideas. Who are those people who are going to come up with the ideas? How can we help them potentially? Who do we connect with? Are you thinking about applying for some of this prize money? What should be the considerations? How can we get the work that we have done, the understanding that we have around evaluation research out there to those people who are thinking about doing this type of work as well? I think these are all places places that we can bring perspective, experience, thoughts to, and that we can take activities on. So I'm going to be quiet and wait. That is a threat. The other thing wasn't a threat. This is a threat. So please, what are your thoughts?
And it's just really thinking about the scope of this initiative. And one of the things we've been doing something up recently is reproducibility and questions around evaluating research from that perspective. Is that inside, outside the scope of something like this group?
I think it's, from my perspective, I would say it's inside the scope, because evaluation of research is exactly that. It's not just, did you share data? It's like, what was the quality of the data that you shared? Is that an important thing?
And, I know in some of the conversations I've had lately, one of the challenges there, and this was brought up earlier today, is around, when mistakes are found, and it's a very well-known researcher told me today, and we all make mistakes, right? What are good practices for identifying those mistakes and correcting them without, endangering someone's career? Or so thinking, that's something this group could look at, best practices or good practices for doing certain areas around, reproducibility or responding to replication challenges or something like that.
I like this idea, guidance on how to respond constructively to errors, right? We are all human. We all make mistakes. And Limor would like to add to that.
Yes, hi, Limor Pierre from Yale University, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Reproducibility Interest Group. And last plenary, we've had folks from this interest group because we definitely see the connection as well for around evaluation and reproducibility. So we have our session tomorrow. You're all invited at 10. But I think that question of how to correct for issues that come up that are not, I think we know how to deal a little bit with fraud and retractions, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about things that are not reproducible. I think we need to figure out things like, what is the margin of error that is acceptable around whether something is reproducible or not. and how all that factors into the evaluation of researchers and whose responsibility is it to evaluate? Is it their own community? Is it something the institution should care about? I think maybe a little. The funders, yes. So yeah, lots of questions in this space.
Thank you for those points, Matt and Limor. And I would kindly ask someone in notes to add this as an idea to actions is a connection between this group and the reproducibility, to think about what guidance might look like around reproducibility and its role in the evaluation of research. What are the characteristics of reproducibility that might be helpful? And I think to discussions that Francoise and I've had previously, and we may have had here as well, how is this different between disciplines? How not all disciplines are like, evaluation is the same and reproducibility means the same thing. We know that's not true. We know there's diversity. And this might be another place where, connecting with the experience of the group of friends might also be useful for those connections to say, hey, in this discipline, what does that look like for you? What should be what should be those evaluatory characteristics? So thank you. Yes.
Andrea Medina Smith from NIST. So talking about all the disciplinary perspectives on evaluation, is there anywhere we have that written down where materials considers evaluation or reusability or the like this, and life sciences considers it this, and the humanities considers it this? We don't have those definitions for things even as basic as impact. What does impact actually mean? So I think that would be something that would be very important moving forward, is having a collective point to look at to say, this is what we mean when we say X.
Yeah, I agree with you, Andrea. I think that would be very, very useful. Can you talk a little bit? I walked away with a microphone, but can you talk a little bit more about, that? Yes, that would be lovely for that to exist. Absolutely. How do we bring that into existence? When we think about the work that would take, how do we get that work together into what a meaningful next step is? What does the outcome of that look like? Did you want to say something about this? Yes.
So there's a couple things that I imagine. One, self-promotion. I am writing a thesis on this currently, on what the definition of impact is of the U.S. public access mandates from 2013. But outside of that, I hate for there to be yet another registry or glossary, but it could be as basic as that. Maybe folding that into one of the FAIR projects. But yeah, it doesn't have to be complicated. It really doesn't. Just something where we can all come together and work on it. More than a Google Doc, but less than 15 different theses.
All right, there's our goal. More than a Google Doc, less than 15 theses work of work. Stephanie.
Thanks, Amy. So just a follow-up question on that. So is there anything out there that exists that we could sort of repurpose or adapt or steal? Yes, borrow with credit. Thanks, Amy. Much better.
Steps away. I think of things like the metadata schema registries. That this was one of like the first library for research data outputs from RDA. What else is there's other things like this. The COData glossary could be a glossary, depending on what terms we're looking at. But there are a few that we could sort of crib off of with credit.
Starting points. I love it. So this idea of what does evaluation mean for different disciplines, putting together a type of resource where we might be able to start thinking about that. Okay, that's a good idea. Yes, Stephanie.
Sorry, just to build on that, because with the uptake of digital research infrastructure, we are starting with the same things. So maybe we could have something that goes across the reproducibility group, our group, this group, and possibly others that work in that field or have connections, so that we have a sort of a wider model or a wider glossary, vocabulary, ontology, terminology, whatever, that just doesn't just work for a group, but works at least across, say, more groups within RDA or even outside RDA.
I like this idea of connection, and it sounds like Francoise, you might have your hand raised.
Yes, I think it makes sense to begin to discuss, to have a cross-disciplinary work done. It's not always done in RDA, to my knowledge, but why not? We said that we are here to put people together on common endeavors. So I think it would be very good to do that. So the point here is that we need people to do it. So if you are interested in participating in that, please sign up in the note document. And I think one of the things we could do at some point after we have begun to discuss is to organize an IG meeting with the evaluation of research interest group, plus the other groups interested in the endeavor, plus the group of friends, and to have to prepare it properly, and then to see what we can do together to begin to work, and then to have an open discussion with people from the other groups. And why not in an interest group meeting open to everybody? But
There we
this
go.
requires to do preparatory work, so we need people to be the contact person and to work with us.
Yes. Thank you, Francoise. Please write your names down. So, other thoughts in this area of what other possible activities? We have 3 new ones right now, or we have 3 in addition to, associated with some of these. Some other thoughts or building on what we have. Could you go back a slide, please? So here were some of the other ones. This disseminate RDA outputs. I think we have some strong connections with the ambassadors to be, group of friends potentially there. You might also think what you yourself as an individual might do in this area. And thinking about the other groups that are active, certainly making connections there, as Francoise said. Next slide, please. I know you must be bored with these 2 slides. Backwards, forwards. And then thinking about the reinforcing the liaison with Kawara, but this idea of bringing these 3 groups together within RDA as well to get to this, let's talk about what are the disciplinary specifics around evaluation and thinking about those. Other thoughts? Or is this enough to be starting out on? Other thoughts? Limor, please.
So there's, and it already came up, but I'm thinking specifically of non-RDA groups that are working in this space, like Helios, the higher education folks, and they have a task group, right, on promotion and tenure and in terms of open science. So I don't know what outputs right now they have, but I know they had a convening. And one nice things there is that they're really plugged into high-level administration in, this is US specifically, but high-level, university presidents. So they, who's having an impact in this area is interesting. But Helios is the one group that I'm thinking about.
Higher education, I don't know, open science. But it is a US-based effort. It's also, Helios is one of the members of our stakeholder group for this interest group. So yes, following up on them, I think Francoise, that might be an action for us, is to bring that stakeholder group together again, kind of for a check-in on the efforts that they've been focusing on and the progress that they've been making. And again, that might help us kind of return to this idea of having a fuller shared understanding around what are the efforts, what are the pathways they're thinking in, what are the routes that they're taking there in those spaces. So thank you for that. And another action.
Yes.
Yes. Go, Francois.
Yes, about the stakeholder forum. Yes, we have to meet to organize a meeting again. I would like to remind that the funders are invited through their interest group. So it's a reminder, a kind reminder.
Thank you for that kind reminder to any possible funders who may be listening in or watching this recording. So thank you for that. Other thoughts? Please.
Hi, I'm Flo Gratarola. I am part of the Shark Interest Group. And I think Lawrence is also online. Yeah, I was thinking on dissemination. I think our recommendations on rewards and incentives are very aligned with this group. And I think we will probably favor also from disseminate. They were just endorsed, and we're looking for adopters. And I think, yeah, our main point is like this needs to be aligned with the reform on how we are evaluating research, right? So yeah, just to say that it would be great to think together also on this part of dissemination. And I also think that for us it was very useful to be a group from different parts of the world within different, institutions and research budgets. And so it helped us to be this terminology on what we consider a reward in different parts of the world, or what it could be an incentive. And so also thinking about this vocabulary glossary, I think also disciplines, but also parts of the world, they would see differently evaluation, I guess. So yeah, just to add that.
That's a very good point. Thank you. That diversity doesn't happen just in disciplines. It happens in cultural settings. It happens in different institutions. It happens in different governance structures, and across all of those. So being able to learn from, appreciate, be curious about how these issues are regarded, how these solutions are created in each of those settings.
No, I was just going to mention an initiative that we're a part of, that about 17 or 18 different funders around the world are a part of, the Research on Research Institute out of the UK, and they have a project looking at research assessment, largely around national assessment, but there's a lot of spillovers to different types of assessment as well. And if it'd be relevant, I'd be happy to reach out at some point and to get an update to this group, see what's going on in those projects. I think there's so many different strands going on in different places. At least understanding some of the big ones together would be really, really important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So Research on Research is another effort. If someone could please write that down in the notes as someone too, if it's not already in our stakeholder forum. Thank you, Matt, for that connection. And we will be reaching out to you. So thank you for that. But this is kind of that idea, right? We don't know, to quote someone I wouldn't want to quote, we don't know what we don't know. Right. And so trying to create that body of knowledge so that we do have that shared understanding about what are the efforts. And that only comes from you, from each of us, right? What is the effort that's going on in your university? What's the effort that's going on in your country right now? How are those efforts connected to other regional efforts that you might be involved in, and bringing those together into a space so that we can have that collective appreciation of how we're all thinking about research as a global endeavor that should be recognized, that should be appreciated, that should be evaluated, and how we do that fairly and equitably in those spaces.
Matt's comment reminded me on Research, there's another community out there that's looking at it from maybe a slightly different angle, and that's the meta-science folks. So these are mostly researchers who are really worried about things like p-hacking and those kind of things. But they're also looking at how to evaluate research, and they do research on research. So another angle and thought.
That's a great one. Do you know them? All right, more connections to be made. Thank you, both of you, for that.
Limor, can you write this in the notes or in the chat, please?
Yes.
their name, please.
Okay, this is great. You're doing great work. Good job, everyone. I'm so happy. Per my time, we have like 8 minutes left for this section-ish. So let's get those ideas rolling, and then we will move into, we have an idea. Whose names are we putting down to take action on the ideas? The really fun part, right? So we get work done. So more ideas. Or are you like, this is enough ideas. Let's move into the getting work done part of it. I'm up for that too. So ideas or work?
I have maybe one more idea I could throw out there.
Yes, please.
Since you've got 8 minutes still allocated. I'll steal some of them. Just thinking about research evaluation and who participates in it. I think we're often thinking about it in terms of how organizations or funders evaluate research in order to advance careers for researchers or give them funding. But there's many different ways in which evaluation takes place. Like there's the researcher's own self-evaluation if they're using FAIR tools to help give them an idea of whether or not they're compliant with practices in their disciplines. And you could perhaps lean on or utilize self-evaluation as a mechanism for a researcher to try and talk about their own data practice. But there's also curators at research data repositories who are verifying the quality of the data. Now, not necessarily in terms of the quality of the data for the research discipline, but the quality of the data as data. And that's something that could perhaps be used as well because they have an intimate understanding, depending on the repository that you're working with. They're going to have produced some sort of evaluation and probably have notes that they've kept on advice that they gave that researcher to improve their research data set that the researcher may or may not have complied with, gone ahead and published whether or not they could have improved it a little bit. And you could perhaps tap that group, tap repository curators for advice on how research data sets could be evaluated.
Great, thank you for that, Beth. For anyone who's working in the research reproducibility, are data curators part of your group? Absolutely. I thought that would be the answer, so thank you. But absolutely, I think that is a very well taken point, Beth. There's certainly the idea of research outputs, how useful, what is their quality, what is their trustability within the space of a particular research, but there's also their inherent quality, their internal validity and reliability to each other as a data set of itself, as good research software, as an instrument that you can rely on as part of that research infrastructure. Other thoughts? Yes. This is a big one.
Thank you. I think there is another group that maybe is not exactly involved in the academic grounds, but most of the researchers have to pass by the evaluation to get incentive of to get any kind of degrees in our institutions or wherever we are. And that is a group that not necessarily go by policies or rules of the academic world. And then we have to think about them too, because researchers will want to not to be evaluated in different places and with different rules and all that. And we have to take into account that from now on, a lot of the evaluation in that matter will be adding evaluation of data, because more and more we are asking to present our data.
Thank you very much for that point, Gabi. I think very, very much so. That's the case where we're thinking about what are the different settings, what are the different contexts that evaluation is taking place in. And again, what does that mean for evaluation as we understand it, as a researcher understands it, as an institution might understand it, as a funder might understand evaluation, and what is being said about those products of research and how is it being said? What are the impacts there? So thank you very much for that as well. A few more minutes left for more ideas before we get to the, like I said, the fun part, making commitments to action. So more ideas online, in chat? Well, with that, let us turn to the document. One moment, please. I need to bring up the document.
We don't hear you anymore, Amy. We don't hear you anymore. Something happened when you lifted your computer.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. It worked.
Success. Success. So please, again, take a minute while I scroll to register yourself in the notes document if you have not done so yet. All right, I see no questions in the question box. Any questions following up on what we've heard today? Yes. Oh, in the notes doc. See that QR code? Oh, actually, better, in Whova, do you have Whova up? There's a link to the collaborative notes document in the Whova thing for the meeting.
Maybe not in Whova, but in the program which is in the RDA site, RDA website. You go to the session and there is a link to the collaborative notes at the top of the session page in the program of P23, which is in the RDA site, on the RDA site.
All right, thank you for the directions in all of the places. I'm going to stop juggling my computer now. It's been fun. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Yes, key point summary. Here we go. So we've had a lot of ideas. Some of those ideas are about connection, right? So we have connecting with the group of friends, ambassadors. How might that work? Who might benefit from that connection collectively? Shark, here's looking at you, that you want to be in on that meeting. Yes. Yes? That was I'm going to take that as a yes. You didn't see that, but it was a definite yes. So excellent. So we have an action there. Shark, evaluation of research, ambassadors. We're going to get together in an interest group meeting to talk about how we can approach this, the distribution of our collective outputs, and how we might take some of that diversity of disciplinary interest in those together. Segueing onto disciplinary interest, we have another connection that we are going to do. We are going to do evaluation of research with infrastructure. Evaluation of infrastructure. Oh, you're going to say something else. Okay, well, we're going to back up and let Stephanie say something else.
So just on the idea with the ambassadors, you might potentially at some point include some of the regions as well to go for the sort of, not so much the disciplinary outreach, but the more global outreach.
Thank you. Footnote to that meeting to be regionally diverse. So all of you, come to the meeting. Share. Okay, moving on from that, we have another connection, which is putting together evaluation of research, reproducibility of research, and infrastructure. And Shark, potentially. Yes, absolutely. That was more yes. You can see her now. So this is another one to talk about, again, how disciplines view evaluation differently. and what is that diversity of materials that might be part of evaluation, and bringing those together with the main thrust being what might we create in terms of guidance or good practice around the results of evaluation. Sometimes errors are discovered. How do we deal with those? How do we manage those productively? How do we manage those constructively as research communities, right? Okay. My memory is getting poor. There was another connection with Kawara. Fabian, you were going to work with, I'm going to guess, Francois to put this together, to do that connection with Kawara and strengthen and re-strengthen that liaison. You all look positive on screen, so I'm going to take that as a yes. Excellent. Wonderful. There was an idea around how can we make better connections with some of those efforts out there. There are a couple different parts of that. There were 2 places to make better connections. There was the Research on Research group. Yes. There is the Meta Science group. Yes. There is bringing these stakeholders together again to talk about where you are. Francoise, I think that's our action item there. And anyone else who is part of those groups or knows those groups, you're part of that too. Let us know. So it's not just us, it's all of us. And then with that, the idea of what would it look like to put together a collection, a registry, something more than a Google Doc potentially, but we might start there, of the diverse international, national, institutional efforts that are happening within the space of evaluation of research, right? So who is interested in that? This idea of creating, how do we know what all of those efforts are? Haha. I will restate the ask. The ask is, let us acknowledge there are many efforts around evaluation of research. We do not collectively know all of these efforts. We are intensely curious about what they are and what they're doing. And, who? Let's make a list, is the ask. So that we have a place where if we hear about an effort, we're like, put it on the list. If we remember hearing about an effort and was like, there was a thing that was interesting, we're like, there's a list. I can go find the list. So this idea of a registry of what's going on out there in the space of evaluation of research. Thoughts on that? Everyone thinks it's a good idea. And yet, if it's just me working on it, I'm going to tell you, you're going to get a Google form. That's how much work I had. I mean, I'm happy to work with people on this, but okay. Hey. Well, okay, we have two people thinking about this. We would like to have more people thinking about what would you like to know about these efforts so that we have fields for people to fill in on our Google form or, whatever.
Sorry, I'm certainly not against a list. I'm just trying to think about, okay, how would people use this list? What's the value add? Because we often, in other groups, we make lists, right? Lists of policies, lists of, and sometimes I wonder if they get made and they sit on a shelf and then no one looks at them. I do think it's important, is the point to make sure we can make these connections with, not at a minute level, but at maybe an organizational level, or just to I guess, draw those links between things. So I guess thinking through what would we use it for, I guess it would be like, hey, we're having a talk on X. There's really interesting work in here, here, and here. Let's see if we can invite some of those people to participate in, as one example of something might be.
Yeah.
Okay. It could be very interesting. I'm just wondering would we use it? And beyond the high level stuff, like the high level stuff, which we could probably capture pretty quickly, but once you start getting down, it gets quite numerous, I imagine. And then you get diminishing value probably for a lot of extra work.
This means This means we need to understand what information we have to provide in the list. You know, beginning by discussing the aim and the metadata attached. I think, you know, when we speak about these things, we have to understand what are the relevant metadata. So the usage is the starting point for it. I agree. And I think that, you know, when I hear people from Coara, they are thinking about topics linked to evaluation, but you never know whether you are redoing something which has already been done. So I think that one of the main aim of that list would be to try to avoid duplication of efforts. And there are efforts everywhere, everywhere about evaluation of research. So this means if we have this in mind, which kind of information do we have to provide attached to each item?
Yep, I think you're right with that, Francoise. I like the idea of definitely what would we use this list for? One is awareness of efforts to avoid duplication. Another is how do we make those connections? If we are thinking of, if we, whatever that we is thinking of being like evaluation of research, we should have a talk. We should have an action. We should start an effort at my institution. Let's start with a wheel that's already made, or at least the idea of a wheel, so that we're not recreating that, so we can learn from what went well, what didn't go well, what would you have done differently? We have those people to reach out to for that. So in thinking about that as a purpose for that list, Lemore is intensely avoiding eye contact, so she's saying she has enough of her own work. But thinking about that, if you think that would be useful, I would invite your contributions to thinking about what about it would be useful. What would be the metadata element that you want to know about, to Francoise's point? What would you find useful in a list like this? And if nothing else, put it in the collaborative notes document. If you forget where that is, send me an email. Send me a message on the lovely RDA web platform. Any of those things, please reach out. And I guess Andrea and I will start putting something very basic together and return to this group with, here are the metadata fields that we think might be useful. Please, do you think they're useful? Because if you don't think they're useful, we're not going to do this. But if you do think they're useful, this is something that you believe could be valuable to your work, let's build forward to that. All right. One of the other areas of work was this thought about what does evaluation look like in different disciplines, right? What's important? What are those characteristics that we say this means it's impactful? This means it's quality work. Thinking about that. To me, that's a much larger kind of mental effort, thinking about that structure. What would that look like? Who would participate? What kind of work, scope of work are we talking about? That requires, I'm going to be honest, that requires more work. That requires a leader, someone who wants to step into that role and be like, okay, I don't have the full idea, but I have the scrap of idea, and I have some people who are willing to work with me on developing that because we recognize the value that this might be to others. We might not be at that stage yet. We might want to make some of these other connections first, but think of this as one of the potential areas that this group could build on, right? To build towards that. Thoughts around that? What do you think? Rather than being like, let's group up, we can be like, let's take a sense of the landscape, see who else is doing what, and then figure out what we can productively add to this space using that as a germ of an idea. Feelings, Andrea?
So we have two proposals on here right now: start a registry of evaluation of research initiatives, and then looking at the discipline-specific research outputs. I think once we got both of those, then we might be able to say, here we go, here's how different disciplines are handling, because we know the research outputs that may follow how they're being evaluated. So in 6 months, let's talk about it.
Fair point. Okay, we'll put that on the docket of a thing to think about if we continue to think that that would be valuable. All right, I do not have the notes in front of me, obviously. So what am I missing? Okay, well, I do not have the notes in front of me, so I will trust that all of you interested people who have stayed this entire session, well done. You did not give up, that you did not be like, I'm out of here. I am taking that to mean that you are committed to the work of evaluating research, that this is a thing you care about, it's a thing you're interested in, it's a thing you want to see grow and develop. And if you want to see it grow and develop, even if it's the smallest scrap of work, of commitment, please, we need your help. As a community, we need your help, right? I know I joined RDA as the only person in my university being like, research data, someone should do a thing about that, probably, right? That was my job. I was the only one. And I came to RDA being like, yeah, I'm the only one. This is not getting done because I'm the only one. No, but I know I can go to this community and be like, so what can we make together? What can we build together in this space? And I think this is another one of those instances where one of us in our campus, one of us in an effort, while they are efforts, we want this evaluation, this idea of evaluation of research to be global, to be disciplinary diverse, to take those perspectives into account when we're thinking about this. So I invite you, each and every one, to think about what is it that you can bring to this, small as it might be. It's valued. And put your name down. It won't be that bad. That is a promise. It's not a threat. So with that, yes,
And
Francois.
something which is very, very pragmatic compared to what you just said, please join the IG if you have not yet done that, because it's a way to keep in mind, to stay in touch with us and to provide the IDs on the mailing list and so on. So sorry, it's really more very, very pragmatic, low level of pragmatism, but it's a starting point also.
And you can do it right now, probably. Next slide, please. Oh, we did this part. Well done, us. Yes. Next slide, please. P24 goals. We have some goals. I think we can take like the things that we just said we were going to do, and those are going to be some goals of ours. We are going to come back and we're going to talk about, hey, we looked at the registry thing. It worked. It didn't work. This is where it fell flat. Hey, we looked at making those commitments. This is what we've produced out of that. Hey, we went and we talked with stakeholders and we increased our pool of the stakeholders forum. Here's what's going on in these places. Any other goals you'd like to advocate for P24? That's a full slate, isn't it? Okay, moving on. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. Gracias for your attention, for your time, for your interest, for your curiosity in these spaces. And we're ending 10 minutes early, so you can go get in line for lunch.